Discover the amazing transformation of a grandma who overcame 30 years of trauma, an inspiring tale of resilience. Betty sat at her workbench, the worn wood familiar beneath her fingers like the memories embedded in the cracked paint of her ranch house walls. Her heart felt heavy, yet a flicker of excitement ignited within her as she shaped the cool, pliable clay. This wasn't just a hobby, it was her lifeline, a thread connecting her to a world she had almost forgotten. But doubt crept in like a thief, whispering reminders of the years she had spent burying her dreams, sacrificing passion for practicality. Was this newfound burst of creativity merely a desperate attempt to escape haunting memories of her late husband, or was it something more profound? As the days turned into weeks, her fingers danced with the potential of artistic expression, yet unease stalked her. The small town she cherished felt constricting, the sentiments of her daughter, Sarah, often echoing through her mind. "Mom, this isn't a path for someone your age," she said, dismissing Betty's aspirations. Each retort sliced deeper than intended, igniting a growing tension between them. The artist in Betty yearned for independence, while the obedient mother in her wrestled with guilt, a familiar feeling, seeping through years of unfulfilled promises to herself. Sighing deeply, she shaped a new vessel, its curves reflecting her inner turmoil. She envisioned showcasing her sculptures at the local art fair, a bold move laden with uncertainty. Could she dare to confront judgmental eyes that had seen the worst of her for decades? Every time she thought of it, her heart raced, caught between exhilaration and fear. What if her artistry wasn't recognized? That fear threatened to unravel her threaded resolve, anchoring her in a sea of self-doubt. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. With the fair date approaching, the thought of her sculptures being displayed brought a rush of determination. Yet each moment spent working was tainted with an undercurrent of anguish. Would the townsfolk see her art as a pathetic attempt to relive lost youth? The weight of judgment loomed large, pressing against her heart as thoughts spiraled. What did it mean to pursue passion in a world that dictated value based on age? The inevitable day arrived, and there she stood, her sculpture set before her like an unguarded treasure. Tension built as she heard murmurs among the crowd. The familiar voice of doubt echoed within her, each comment seemingly taunting her sanity. Just as a spark of hope began to shimmer, a rival artist broke the silence with sneered judgment. Can she really take this seriously at her age? The words sent shockwaves through her, igniting fury and vulnerability in equal measure. As she struggled to breathe, the need to defend herself clashed with the deep-seated fear of not being enough. The stakes felt higher than ever, the fragile bond with Sarah teetering on the edge of fracture. Would this be the moment she claimed her legacy, or the one that shattered everything she held dear? Betty's heart raced in the moments that followed. She stood at the precipice, caught between the echoes of her past and the fervent whispers of possibility. The taunts of the rival artist gnawed at her confidence, but deep down, she felt a flicker of resistance rising. It was time to confront her fears. She took a deep breath, steadying herself as she glanced around at the audience. Each expression was a mirror reflecting her own anxiety, questioning her choices, her worth, her right to stand there amongst artists half her age. For too long, she had let their opinions dictate her self-image. Today, she would reclaim her narrative. This moment was not just about her art, it was about her journey, the journey of a woman who had buried her identity under layers of obligation and grief. With each sculpture, she poured her soul into tangible forms of expression, each curve and angle a testament to her struggles and triumphs. They weren't just clay and form, they were her voice, raw and unfiltered. With resolve sparked, she stepped closer to the audience. "Art has no age limit," she called out, her voice surprising herself with its strength. "Each piece speaks a story of resilience, of facing life's unkindness and transforming it into beauty." Betty's hands gestured expressively toward her work, fueled by a rush of adrenaline. Gasps broke through the murmurs as her words took root. For the first time, she noticed glimmers of intrigue in the crowd's eyes. The initial judgment she feared melted slightly, replaced by curiosity. Suddenly her reality shifted. In that moment of vulnerability, she had embraced her artistry, and with it, her complexities. She had stepped into the light, no longer shrouded in others' expectations. Yet her triumph was short-lived. The rebuttal from the rival artist felt like ice in her veins. "Beauty doesn't equal quality," he shot back, arms crossed, skeptical eyes narrowing. His ridicule was armor he wielded, but it wouldn't penetrate the barriers she had begun to fortify. The crowd's attention hung in the air, suspended between admiration and disdain. Betty's pulse quickened. This was her chance to define her art on her own terms and to challenge the notion that age could diminish creativity. What is art if not an expression of one's lived experiences? She countered, lifting her chin defiantly. The edges of her resolve hardened, crystallizing with a newfound sense of authenticity. Returning to her sculptures, she narrated their stories, sharing the intimate motivations behind each curve and contour. It was liberating. As the words flowed, so did a surge of empowerment. She was not just a grandma lost in creative whims, she was a creator, a survivor, a force to be reckoned with. Yet, as she reveled in the small victories, the shifting of eyes, the subtle nods of approval, whispers of self-doubt lingered. Was her art worthy beyond this moment? Would Sarah ever understand? Could Betty forge her own path without alienating her daughter in the process? The crowd began to disperse, murmurs of interest mingled with skepticism. Was this truly enough to earn her a place among them? Suddenly, a pair of familiar eyes approached. Sarah stood there, arms crossed, gazing at her mother, a storm of emotion brewing beneath her calm exterior. "Mom," Sarah began slowly, almost as if she were weighing each word cautiously, "do you really think this is who you are?" In that instant, Betty realized the confrontation ahead was not merely external but internal. The time had come to face not only the expectations of her community but also to challenge the fears rooted in her own heart. Would she choose to embrace her true self, regardless of the opinions around her, including her daughter's? The weight of Sarah's question hung heavily in the air, thrumming in rhythm with the uncertainty surging through Betty's veins. Their gazes locked, a magnetic pull of familiarity mixed with a piercing challenge. As she searched her daughter's eyes for answers, doubt swirled within. Was she truly embodying the essence of who she was, or simply masking herself under the guise of newfound ambition? "I've spent years trying to figure that out," Betty admitted, her voice tremulous, breaking the standoff. "And I've realized that who I am isn't defined by age or anyone's opinion. It's about expressing what is inside me, the pain, the love, the chaos." Her words teetered on vulnerability, revealing the labyrinth of emotions she had long buried. Sarah remained silent, the frown on her face deepening as she processed her mother's declaration. To Betty, the silence felt electrifying, as if both were standing on the brink of an emotional precipice. What would it mean if her daughter didn't accept this new version of herself? The thought twisted in her gut, igniting a flicker of panic. Yet amidst the turmoil, a surge of determination welled inside her. She had come too far to retreat now, had fought too hard to reclaim her identity. "This art is my voice, Sarah. It may not make sense to you now, and that is okay. But I need you to understand it's a part of who I am, who I've always been striving to be." But Sarah's expression didn't shift. "Maybe I just don't want you to be hurt again," she said softly, the storm of emotions cracking the surface of her calm demeanor. I don't want you to chase after something that might never be real. Betty's heart clenched. It was true, over the past years, she had felt irrelevant, lost in the roles of caretaker and mother, causing resentment to creep in with every mischance to pursue her passions. It is real, Sarah. I'm finding pieces of myself I thought were gone forever, she responded, the raw honesty fired by the need to break through the wall between them. Uncertainty flickered across Sarah's face, a hint of reluctant understanding nudging through her defenses. But what if the art world doesn't accept you? What if I can support it? The fear embedded in her daughter's voice struck deep. I want you to be proud of me, Betty said, summoning all her maternal instincts. But I also have to be proud of myself first. No matter what anyone thinks. Tracing her fingers across a nearby sculpture, she felt the cool surface, grounding herself in the truth that her hands had created. Each intricately formed detail was more than just a manifestation of her artistry, it was a direct link to her scattered self, as tangible as the love she had poured into raising Sarah. Suddenly, an idea sparked, a creative breakthrough infused with a sense of urgency. Betty turned back to Sarah, the strength in her voice firm. Let us collaborate. Let us make something together that we can both be proud of. It could give us a chance to connect on an entirely different level. A flicker of surprise crossed Sarah's face, followed by intrigue. The offer hung in the air, opening the door to a possibility Betty had once feared to explore. I'd like that, Sarah finally responded, her defensive posture softening just a fraction. For the first time, the idea of a shared journey bubbled with hope, a vision of healing and empowerment. As the weight of their conversation began to lift, Betty felt a sense of clarity peeling away the layers of fear that had clothed her for so long. If she could forge this connection, perhaps she could dismantle the barriers not just between them, but within herself as well. When she spoke again, resolve coursed through her. Together, we can redefine ourselves, Sarah. This is just the beginning. As they shared a tentative smile, a new chapter sparked into existence, breathing life into the spaces where doubt once thrived. Yet, Betty could sense that deeper challenges lurked ahead. Would the world outside be as receptive as they were to this emerging bond? And would her journey of self-discovery within the art realm meet with acceptance or further resistance? The real test, Betty understood, was just unfolding. Betty woke the next morning with the sun filtering softly through the blinds, illuminating the remnants of last night's breakthroughs. The conversation with Sarah had ignited a spark, yet the gravity of their uncharted collaboration weighed heavily on her mind. It was exhilarating and terrifying in equal measure. What did it mean to meld their artistic voices into one? Would Sarah's creativity blend with her own, or would their differences clash? After a hurried breakfast, Betty found herself standing in front of her easel, the blank canvas seemingly challenging her resolve. As she dipped her brush into vibrant hues, doubts began to swirl within. What if she faltered? The shadows of self-doubt, ever present, whispered cruelly, what if this is just another failure? They mocked her ambition, taunting her past inconsistencies. Determined to banish those whispers, she held on to the memory of Sarah's expression, the flicker of openness, the hint of acceptance. That moment propelled her forward. She mixed colors fervently, each stroke of the brush resonating with her emotions, the chaos inside her finding expression. Each layer of paint was not just about art but about her very essence, years neglected, years of silence in pursuit of others' approval. Midway through her creative frenzy, the front door clicked open, and Sarah's voice floated through the air. Mom, are we still on for our project? The question unfurled something within Betty. This was her chance, not just for connection, but for realignment with her authenticity. Absolutely, she called back, her heart racing with both excitement and nervousness. Sarah appeared, her eyes brightening at the sight of her mother's nearly complete piece, a swirling mix of colors, representing the tumultuous yet vibrant journey they were about to undertake. "Wow, it's beautiful. What are you calling it?" Betty paused, considering the title carefully. This wasn't merely an artwork, it symbolized the layers of their relationship. "I think I'll call it Rebirth," she replied, her voice steady. The name echoed deep within her, invoking a sense of renewal. As the day passed, they tossed around ideas, sketching and brainstorming together in a flurry of shared laughter and creativity. It felt liberating. For the first time in ages, Betty could feel pieces of her old self merging with the new version she aspired to become. They explored themes of transformation and resilience, igniting fires within that had long flickered in the dark. Yet, amidst the laughter, a sobering thought lingered: what if this collaboration revealed deeper fissures? The way they interpreted art could clash, their generational perspectives might lead to conflict. Betty bit her lip as she considered the inevitable reality of artistic disagreements. She also feared that this venture might lay bare old wounds, fractures in their relationship stemming from years of miscommunication and struggle. Still, the thrill of experimentation outweighed her apprehensions. They decided on a collaborative piece, combining Betty's abstract boldness with Sarah's more structured, modern aesthetic. Each element became a push and pull between their styles, a true representation of their dynamic relationship, complex but ultimately beautiful. As they worked side by side later that week, Betty couldn't help but marvel at how far they had come. The air hummed with their joint creativity, and moments of doubt faded into clarity. Her professionalism began to flourish. She developed her artistic skills in tandem with addressing Sarah's unique insight. The collaboration wasn't devoid of friction, but each tension became a stepping stone, carrying them both toward greater mutual understanding. Days turned into a week, and with each new session, Betty could sense her confidence rekindling. She was embracing the challenge, learning to trust her instincts, and most importantly, she was rediscovering her past self through the lens of this new venture. However, lurking in the corners of her mind were whispers of an unforgiving art world. What awaited them outside the sanctuary of their home studio? The real test of their alliance loomed, and Betty found herself standing at a precipice, wrestling with questions far more profound than simply whether her art would be accepted. Could she continue to embrace this new dimension of herself in a community that thrived on critique and judgment? As they finally unveiled their piece from their collaborative effort, an electric charge filled the air, hinting at the vulnerability that lay ahead. Would their bond withstand the scrutiny of others? Would this reaffirmation of self lead to acceptance, or was the risk of exposure a double-edged sword? The moment was ripe with anticipation, yet Betty couldn't shake the feeling a reckoning awaited, one that could reshape everything she had fought so hard to build. In the days that followed, Betty found herself immersed in a whirlwind of emotions and anxious excitement coursing through her veins like a raw electric current. The unveiling of their collaborative piece loomed, and each moment leading up to it felt heavy with both promise and dread. Every stroke on their canvas was a testament not only to their artistic collaboration but also to the reconciliation of hurt, misunderstanding, and the aspirations that had long lain dormant. They sought feedback from close friends, informal critiques that offered a blend of encouragement and constructive criticism. However, even these intimate exchanges pricked at her insecurities. What if the raw honesty she poured into the piece wasn't enough? What if, after everything, they became subjects of ridicule? She wrestled with these fears, identifying how deeply intertwined they were with her past. At night, when the studio was silent, Betty wrestled with the specter of her former self, the artist who had shied away from boldness, the mother who inadvertently pushed her daughter into boxes that felt too confining. Memories of neglecting her own voice for the approval of others haunted her, urging her to stay within familiar boundaries. But this time felt different. Each time she returned to the canvas, she felt empowered by the very essence of rebirth. It wasn't merely a title, it resonated with the growth they had both embraced. They painted layers together, moving in tandem, their artistic dialogue deepening their bond. By exploring Sarah's structured style alongside her own freeform approach, Betty began to dismantle emotional walls she had thought indestructible. One evening, while they worked late into the night, a moment arose that brought everything into focus. Infused with fatigue yet buzzing with creativity, Sarah looked over her shoulder and said, "What if we pushed it one step further? What if we added shadows to the bright colors?" Betty paused, taken aback by the suggestion. Shadows. It was an astute observation, the artistic nuances that could bring depth to their work, the very elements that mirrored the complexities of their relationship. Yet, fear gripped her heart. Would those shadows suggest darkness in their union, fractures in her efforts at transformation? As she considered Sarah's proposition, a profound realization washed over her. Shadows were necessary. They could enhance the vibrancy of the colors, adding dimension and depth to their artistic expression. She was struck by the metaphor, embracing life's darker moments didn't negate the brightness, instead, it complemented it. With renewed resolve, she nodded, "Yes, let us do it." They spent that night layering rich, dark tones into their already vibrant palette. Each stroke felt liberating, as if she was simultaneously confronting her fears, peeling back the layers of her own history. Betty began to embrace not just the brightness of her performance as an artist but also the recognition of her vibrant flaws and fears. But as their piece neared completion, a familiar dread crept back into her thoughts. What would the art community's reaction be? How would they interpret the shadows that symbolized her struggles? These questions echoed painfully in her mind, a testament to the pressure she felt to uphold a societal standard that often dismissed vulnerability. Sitting back and surveying their work, Betty felt a flicker of doubt resurfacing. The intricate complexity of the piece reflected a bond that could just as easily fracture under scrutiny. She turned to Sarah, who was stepping back to admire their creation. "Are we ready for this?" she asked, her eyes searching her daughter's face for reassurance. Sarah didn't hesitate. "We are ready, Mom. This is us, light and dark, beautiful and messy. It's real." That single affirmation sent waves of warmth through Betty, igniting a determination to face what came next. There was no turning back. This artistic endeavor had become a mirror, reflecting not only their partnership but the evolution of her very self. As they prepared to present their work, a thought settled in Betty's mind, a growing realization that readiness isn't about the absence of fear. It's about acknowledging those fears, transforming them into fuel for growth. But just as she felt a flutter of confidence, a text buzzed through her phone, a reminder of the gallery's imminent opening night. There was no time now to turn back. That night, as they stood together before their art for the first time at the gallery, a palpable tension filled the air. With each passing moment, a question lingered at the forefront of Betty's mind: how would others perceive their labor of love? The potential for validation mingled with the fear of rejection as the gallery doors opened, and a flow of strangers began to filter in. In that crowded atmosphere charged with anticipation, Betty whispered a silent prayer to the universe, as if hoping to receive confirmation that this moment was indeed meant for them. Would this unveiling fortify their bond, or would it expose the vulnerabilities that threatened to unravel everything she had worked hard to rebuild? Only time would tell, but it was time for the world to see them, just as they were, unfiltered, unashamed, and undeniably real. The gallery buzzed with chatter and clinking glasses as Betty stood beside her daughter, the weight of their creation pressing against her chest like an anchor. The crowd swirled around them, each face reflecting a spectrum of curiosity and expectation. She fought against nervous energy, reminding herself of the transformation she was attempting not just in her art but in her entire being. "What if they don't understand?" she murmured, her voice barely audible over the din. Sarah caught her eye, her gaze steady. "What if they do?" The simplicity of her daughter's response struck Betty like a sudden gust of wind. There lay a universe of possibilities beyond her fear. For too long, she had defined herself through the lens of others' judgments. Perhaps it was finally time to step into her own light, shadows and all. As patrons began to examine their piece, whispers of admiration floated through the air. Betty's heart raced, an ache of vulnerability coursing through her. She watched as elaborations about their work unfolded. Words like raw, powerful, and unapologetic drifted towards her, wrapping around her like a warm embrace. Each compliment felt like a balm on her wounds, yet each praise also sharpened her doubts. She wanted validation, but the fear of it never manifesting clawed at her confidence. Suddenly, a sharp voice reached her ears mid-conversation. "It's surprising to see something so chaotic." It belonged to a prominent art critic who had a reputation for liking traditional aesthetics. "Color without form can't really carry deep meaning, can it?" Betty's heart sank. She felt exposed under the weight of the critique, her mind racing to defend their choices. But deep down, she recognized the critique's reflection of her anxiety's fear of being branded inadequate echoed in those words. "What would you choose to communicate?" Betty found herself asking, her voice steady yet frail. "Chaos can reveal what lies beneath. It can tell a story." The critic raised an eyebrow, a challenge igniting in his gaze. "Or it can simply confuse." Betty inhaled deeply. "Maybe it reflects the confusion we all carry. Life isn't always a neat construct." The realization flooded her, her tone dripped with newfound assertiveness. The shadows they had painted were not only for aesthetics but were echoes of her own struggle, the chaos that had once ruled her life and art. Not every piece must comply with the form, sometimes the rawness held the greatest truths. Each word felt freeing, igniting courage within her. The critic shifted, a glimmer of intrigue flickering across his face as he engaged in deeper discussion. Betty felt her heart swell. Maybe confronting the shadows didn't just elevate their art, maybe it elevated her own identity. As the evening progressed, the atmosphere shifted, allowing her to observe the myriad of interpretations that swirled about their piece. The comments, both positive and critical, struck her with an unexpected revelation: art would always be subjective. What mattered was the authenticity of her voice and the courage in exposing her journey. Each stroke, each shadow shared, was an invitation for others to reflect on their complexities. With every conversation, Betty felt the foundations of her old self shatter. The sanctity of her vulnerabilities became her strength, opening channels of connection she had previously feared. She wasn't just an artist on display, she was a woman reclaiming her narrative. As night began to dissolve into early dawn, Sarah kept stealing glances at her mother, pride illuminating her expression. The experience had been starkly transformative for both of them. Betty turned toward her daughter, heart full, ready for another conversation about her own growth. But just as she began to speak, a man approached them, a respected gallery owner with a gaze that promised opportunity. "I must say, your piece has captivated many here tonight," he started, his tone both serious and inviting. "I would love to explore how we might showcase your work further." Betty's breath caught in her throat. This was an unexpected chance to take her artistry beyond that night, but it also meant more vulnerability ahead. "Are we ready for this?" she thought, reflecting on the shadows that continued to linger in her mind. After all the progress she had made, stepping into uncharted territory seemed simultaneously thrilling and terrifying. "What do you really want, Betty?" echoed her inner voice, pressing for a decision. She felt the pull of opportunity contrasted with the weight of uncertainty, taut with possibility. "Let us talk," she finally replied, her resolve blooming as new fears faded into the background. It was time to embrace whatever came next. In that moment, she understood that each new chapter would not just unveil more of her art but also pieces of herself she had yet to discover. What risks lay ahead? Betty was soon to find out. The gallery owner's invitation hung in the air like a vibration waiting to be released. Betty gleaned from his expression that he wasn't merely interested in their piece, he was looking for artists with something to say, something genuine. This was more than a transaction, it was a doorway she had the power to step through. Her heart thudded in a rhythm of anticipation and fear. "Let us meet next week," the gallery owner continued, unfazed by her silence. "We can discuss potential exhibitions, a possible series that could align with your vision." Betty nodded, even as her thoughts tempest-tossed on the high seas of self-doubt. Could she sustain the breadth of creativity required for more than just one exhibition? Could she endure the risk of exposure every time she presented her inner world to the public eye? After the crowd dispersed, Betty stood with Sarah, who was bubbling over with excitement. "Mom, this could change everything for you." "Or nothing at all," she responded, her voice slightly flat. "I'm not sure I can handle the weight of expectation." Sarah's excitement dimmed momentarily. "But what about the fact that you put yourself out there, that you fought back against that critic? Do you know how powerful that was?" Recognition ignited within Betty. Their interaction hadn't just been a defense, it had been a claim of her identity. "You're right," she conceded, her voice steadier now. "But what if that wasn't enough? Mom, you've already transformed once tonight. You can do it again," Sarah encouraged, her eyes full of belief. "This could be the beginning of a new journey. You've learned to confront your demons, now it's time to paint new ones." The words resonated profoundly, igniting sparks within her. Betty realized that the exhibition wasn't merely about showcasing her art, it was about embracing herself as an evolving work in progress. Each piece she created, each layer she painted, would reflect not only her past but the transformation she harvested through it. As the week wore on, she grappled with her emerging self-image. In quiet moments, she describbled down inspirations and ideas. Yet, there were nights when doubts crept back in. Memories of criticisms she had faced in her earlier years clawed from the recesses of her mind. Who did she think she was to not only create but to be celebrated? One evening, as she sat at her kitchen table, Betty questioned the foundation upon which she was building. What if the pieces before her were not reflections of her inner truth but merely shadows of someone she used to be? What if she reverted to her old habits, sticking to familiar but uninspiring themes? She closed her eyes, flirting with panic. But in doing so, she also acknowledged a very real solution: the urge to dig deeper, to confront the heavier shadows she had yet to impose upon canvas. Could she allow her newer creations to delve into that darker territory? The fears she shunned were also the raw material of her artistic voice. The next morning, she committed to an unsettling exploration. She placed a fresh canvas on her easel, determined to tackle a piece that represented the turmoil she long avoided. With each brushstroke, she confronted vivid memories, fragments of pain, echoes of trauma that once suffocated her, and the bright streaks of triumph that now filled the cracks. It was messy. It was chaotic. It was living, breathing art. Every session was a battleground, each stroke a confrontation with her fears and failures. With boldness, she embraced the turmoil, fueled by the figments of hope and resilience within her. Each layer peeled back the comfort zone she had clung to for so long. Involution shifted forward into evolution, she began to create from a place of authenticity. As Betty prepared for her first meeting with the gallery owner, the weight of potential loomed. Every emotion, the exhilaration of possibility and pangs of insecurity, gnawed at her edges. But there, deeper within, was a flicker of determination that announced she would no longer cower before her art or herself. The day of reckoning approached, and as she stood before the finished piece, an almost electric anticipation coursed through her veins. What if this time, she could not only share art but also reveal a truer version of herself? The stakes were high, and the shadows still loomed, yet she was ready to confront them. And then came a knock at the door. A messenger stood with a letter addressed to Betty, marked with the gallery's insignia. The moment was charged, pregnant with potential. Had she been accepted into a new realm of possibilities, or was she walking into yet another challenge that would test her resolve? As she opened the envelope, her heart raced, the weight of her future hanging delicately in the balance. What lay inside could mark a significant turn in her journey, but the true challenge was what she would do with whatever they decided. Would she rise to meet it, or would she hide once more in the shadows? Betty tore the envelope open, her fingers trembling as she unfolded the letter. The gallery owner's neat script danced before her eyes, and she struggled to concentrate. "We would like to invite you to showcase your work," it read, her pulse accelerating with each word. "Your unique voice resonated with us, and we see great potential in your story." Relief surged through her, swiftly followed by a sharp pang of fear. This was far from a mere acceptance, it was an endorsement of her struggles, her history, the shadows she'd grappled with. What if she faltered? What if the public could see the imperfections she hid behind her art? The words swirled like vibrant paints, but beneath, insecurities bubbled. Did she truly have the strength to expose herself? Questions filled the room as if it were thick with the tension of unspoken truths. "This is not the end," she murmured to herself, but the beginning of an unsettling journey. She took a breath, steadying herself against the weight of realization that struck harder than any critique had before. Finally, it wasn't just about the gallery, it was about what she, as an artist, was willing to confront. She reflected on the turmoil entwined within her creation's betrayal, loss, and ultimately the profound joy of healing. But could she articulate that to an audience who might only see colors and forms, not the emotions behind them? In this moment, the kitchen table, littered with paint samples and canvases, transformed into a platform where vulnerability was as palpable as the paint on her brush. Each piece she would display would possess an echo of her heart, it felt raw, exposed, terrifying. The day of her meeting approached with an inevitability that she couldn't ignore. She meticulously planned her presentation, balancing colors and narratives that unveiled the layers of her existence. For Betty, each painting became a chapter, intricate and authoritative, mirroring transformations born from hardship. Yet, doubts lurked close by, whispering seductive tales of self-doubt. The night before their meeting, she tossed and turned, questioning her worth as an artist. Had she truly transformed, or was she merely reconstructing an image of resilience, tightening the mask that concealed her fears? The realization struck her hard. Art, after all, demanded authenticity, not just recreations of the past. At daybreak, she stood before her canvas, brushing oil across the surface with newfound fervor. The art became an extension of her journey, illuminated by raw honesty. In moments of doubt, she struggled to focus on the artist she wanted to be. But with each stroke, she reclaimed the narrative, surmounting the impact of every painful memory, reshaping it into a colorful testimony of survival. As she approached the gallery that fateful morning, her heart pounded like a drum, each rhythm signaling a step towards self-discovery. The exterior of the building loomed before her like an inviting fortress, both refuge and challenge. She steadied herself. This wasn't merely about claiming space in the gallery, it was about claiming space in her own life. With every beat, she reminded herself of Sarah's encouragement. "You can do this, you've done the hard part." Her resolve solidified. She stepped inside. The gallery owner greeted her warmly, his demeanor a mixture of professionalism and genuine interest that immediately put her at ease. As they walked through the space, he listened intently while she explained the concepts behind each piece, revealing the fears and triumphs that churned within. "Your work speaks volumes, Betty," he said, his voice steady and affirming. "What is essential is the story behind it, the truth you paint. Are you ready to share that with the world? It may be daunting, but the impact could be profound." His words struck a chord. The question lingered in the space between them. She hesitated, the weight of her artistic identity palpable and heavy. Did she truly want to bare her soul? Was the world ready for the fullness of her experience? In the depths of her uncertainty, she felt a flicker of resolve ignite again. Her painted shadows, transformed into vibrant figures, could be her guiding light. Allowing herself to be seen meant confronting the unflinching layers of truth that defined her. "Let us take this leap together," Betty finally answered, her voice steady, although her heart raced. "I'm ready to show them who I am." As the gallery owner nodded, a sense of mastery washed over her. This was no longer simply about her art, it was about the revelation of herself. Stepping into accountability and authenticity had never carried such weight, yet for the first time, it felt liberating. In this new chapter of unveiling herself, doubts still lingered, but triumphs outshone them. Her journey teetered at the precipice of her transformative exhibition. But was this leap enough to portend the evolution of her artistic soul? And then, as she moved forward, a startling memory bled through the critic from the past who taunted and belittled her. Would he emerge to challenge her once more, or had she outgrown the shadows of harsh judgments? As the day of the exhibition drew closer, Betty found herself swept away in a whirlwind of preparation, both thrilling and disorienting. Each evening, she would lose herself in her studio, surrounded by the aroma of paint and the murmur of her thoughts. Her creations had morphed into vibrant narratives that welcomed scrutiny. With every session, she allowed herself to embrace the stories behind each piece, the moments of despair that had once seemed insurmountable, the quiet victories that went unnoticed, the laughter echoing through tears. Reflecting on her journey, she began to fine-tune the narratives, infusing them with the lessons learned from her struggles. Yet, as the date loomed, anxiety took hold. Was she constructing a facade, or was she genuinely stepping into her own skin? The pit of her stomach rolled in knots, and the mirror became a confounder. She searched her reflection for signs of authenticity but found herself wrestling with a tighter grip of self-doubt. Each time she completed a piece, she pondered whether the artistry resonated with truth or merely encapsulated her history in an aesthetic shell. The evening before the exhibition, Betty assembled her collection, arranging the paintings to create a cohesive story. With each canvas hung, the symphony of colors both excited and terrified her. She paused to step back and surveyed her work, a landscape of her life laid bare before her. In that moment, she pondered if she had prepared herself for the public's inevitable reactions. What if they shrugged, seeing only layers of paint and an unremarkable display? The whispers of her past critic seeped in, a ghost that rattled her ability to see her progress. Would his shadow loom over her? The remnants of her years of trauma loomed like dark clouds, threatening to drown the sunlight of her emerging confidence. She could hardly shake the belief that perhaps she was still that girl who faltered in the face of scrutiny, who longed for validation yet feared rejection. "You've come too far to turn back now," she reminded herself, pushing against the tidal wave of memories. "Your journey matters." She began to breathe through the fears, envisioning the faces of those who would stand before her work, vulnerable yet engaged. This was an opportunity to ignite connection, to map her story through the eyes of others who may find solace in her colors. With renewed conviction, she set herself a challenge to approach the gallery squarely, not as an artist showcasing her work, but as a woman openly sharing her life, imperfections and all. Each painting told a chapter, the dark that made the light so much more precious. However, doubts persisted. As she tucked herself into bed, flickering thoughts rolled through her mind like distant thunder, reminding her of the critic's harsh words dancing just beyond the door of her consciousness. Had she drawn strength from such memories, or was it merely the haunting reminder of her vulnerabilities? In that ambiguity, a decision crystallized: this exhibition would not just be an unveiling of her art, but an unveiling of Betty, the person. Morning arrived with the rich scent of coffee wafting through the house, the hustle of the day's excitement invigorating her. As she dressed with intention, she donned an outfit that felt like armor, a reflection of her rebirth. Today, she planned to rediscover her voice. Arriving at the gallery, she experienced a thrill unlike any she had felt before. The space pulsed with the energy of creation, and as she walked among the exhibits, each piece glowed with a resonant clarity. Yet, even amidst the vibrant surroundings, an unsettling knot twisted in her stomach. Would she be enough? Just then, she glimpsed a familiar figure standing at the entrance, the critic who had marred her past. A rush of emotions surged within her: anger, fear, but most acutely, a challenge beckoned. The time had come to face the echoes of her past and embrace the possibility of an authentic connection with her audience, irrespective of his looming presence. And so, with nerves taut yet empowered, she stepped into the gallery and prepared to reclaim not just her artistic identity, but her essence. Would confronting the ghosts of yesterday spark the transformation she needed to fully embrace her journey ahead? Betty stood in the gallery, surrounded by her vibrant creations, feeling the weight of anticipation pressing heavily on her chest. The air vibrated with whispers and laughter, patrons milling about, discussing the art on the walls. As her gaze swept across the room, she spotted the critic. His presence loomed large, both a reminder of her past failures and the promise of her newfound courage. Today was not just about the art, it was about asserting her identity. No longer a mere spectator of her life, she stood poised at the intersection of vulnerability and strength. The shadows of doubt still lingered, but they felt less oppressive now, replaced by a flicker of resilience. She inhaled deeply, preparing herself. "Betty." A familiar voice broke through the cacophony. It was Sarah, rushing toward her with an excited glimmer in her eyes. "Look at the crowd. People are genuinely interested in your work." The swell of pride surged within Betty as her daughter hugged her tightly. In this moment, Betty felt seen not just as an artist, but as a mother who had persevered to rediscover herself. Embracing Sarah, she realized that their bond had only strengthened through this journey, that their love for art had transcended the barriers of doubt and misunderstanding. This was a shared victory. "Are you ready?" Sarah asked, her tone a mix of encouragement and concern. Betty took a quick breath. "I think so. It's time to let them see me. Not just the artist, but the person I've become." As they stepped together toward the center of the gallery, the chatter fell to a hush, the atmosphere alive with expectation. Betty's heart raced. This was her moment, her stage. With Sarah beside her, she approached the waiting crowd, the critic mixing among them, a vulnerability open wide. "Good evening, everyone," she began, her voice steady though quivering with emotion. "Thank you for joining me tonight. My work is a reflection of a journey, one filled with shadows and colors, resilience and rebirth." The crowd listened intently, and she could feel Sarah's supportive energy radiating beside her. The critic, standing back with crossed arms, observed closely. A flicker of curiosity glinted in his eyes. Betty continued to share her story, her voice gaining strength as she unveiled the deeper meanings behind each piece. Art has no age limit, no boundaries to creativity. Each canvas represents a part of my life, my triumphs over trauma, the blending of shadows and light. Her words poured out with conviction, a soothing balm for years of silence and self-doubt. As she spoke, she made eye contact with individuals in the crowd, watching their expressions shift from curiosity to empathy, understanding radiating through their gazes. Suddenly, to her surprise, the critic stepped forward. "What are you trying to communicate with the darker elements?" he asked, his voice deeper than she remembered. Betty met his gaze with unyielding composure. Life's essence cannot be distilled into just light or dark, both elements coexist in a dance that forms our identity. The shadows are as vital as the vibrancy. They hold memories, they demand recognition. Not all beauty is polished. A wave of a response rippled through those gathered. Betty could feel the release of tension as even some of her lingering worries began to evaporate, wrapping themselves in the acknowledgement of shared human experience. The critic studied her before responding, "Interesting. It's a bold perspective, one I would like to explore further." His words caught her off guard, igniting warmth within. This was validation she hadn't anticipated, confirmation of her hard-earned growth. The art had become more than mere form, it was a testament of perseverance, a reclaiming of her narrative. The evening progressed, and emotion sparked anew as patrons shared their interpretations. Betty floated from conversation to conversation, each engagement revealing more about her journey. Acceptance replaced the need for approval. She was both artist and woman, a robust identity untethered from the weight of others' expectations. As the night unfolded, she witnessed transformative connections. People thanked her not only for showcasing their artistry but for bringing forth conversations about vulnerability, resilience, and authenticity. And then the gallery owner approached her, a satisfied smile on his face. "Betty, what a compelling presentation tonight. Your work deserves to be seen beyond these walls. Let us discuss further exhibitions." A surge of exhilaration rushed through her. This wasn't just an opportunity for recognition, it was a command to continue expressing herself, unfurling her voice to the world. She nodded, a smile breaking her features brightly. In that moment, as the crowd began to dissipate and the weight of the evening settled upon her, Betty understood the enormous journey she had undertaken. No longer trapped by the shadows of her past, she had emerged stronger, more creative, and unapologetically herself. She had claimed her place in the art world not just as someone who created, but as an embodiment of her journey. Turning to Sarah, who stood nearby, eyes shining with pride, Betty felt her heart swell. Together, they had transformed, not only as mother and daughter but as individuals tethered by dreams and artistry. "This is just the beginning," she declared, her confidence radiating with newfound clarity. Her voice carried across the gallery words that not only marked her comeback but also promised an unfolding adventure. The realm of creative possibility lay wide open, beckoning with every brushstroke ahead. With a deep sense of fulfillment, she stepped forward into the world, a space where her shadows and lights intersected, illuminating a magnificent pathway to a future she was finally ready to own. Now, my friends, join this journey of transformation by subscribing immediately to ensure you don't miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to fuel this channel's growth. Drop your reactions and theories about this story in the comments, as we celebrate the triumph of personal growth together. And share instantly with at least 5 friends who need inspiration in their lives. Don't wait even one more second to support this channel and the powerful stories we tell.